All right. Well, I know I'm between you and a beach party and following in the steps of GE and Live Nation as a lowly government contractor. I'll wrap this up for you. So my name's Steve Lewis. I'm based out of Reston, Virginia. I work for a consulting firm in DC area. I provide on-site development and engineering support for a federal government customer. I had a discussion with some of the conference organizers about what we were doing on site with the customer, and they were really interested in it and said, you know, you should come out and come talk about this. So with that, I'm going to start off with a quick overview of what one of my coworkers had briefed a couple years ago over in Vail and how we've built upon that. And then I'll go forward and talk about some of the challenges on how the identity work that we briefed and talked about fits into the overall authorization scheme. And then cover some basic identity access management antecedents that I recently heard at a thing I attended out in DC. And then I'll go into some basic use cases of what we've worked on and how we've solved it. All right. So my coworker came out and he was basically chatting about the necessity of a token service and then what it could provide for us in the government space. What we were seeing or dealing with at the time was this. Everybody was building their basic interfaces in the spaghettis of trust. We found that once we started speaking to the development teams and working with them with the token service, we were able to push forward and simplify their integration and externalize a lot of their authorization issues. We also started talking to the customer and explaining to them that the trust actually starts and begins with the user. And then from there, you have to traverse it back with service chaining, leveraging the context as you go through for authorization decisions. So that way, as you're going back to make a decision, I know who you are, I know that device you're hitting, and I actually understand the service that you're on top of the service that you're trying to access. Sorry about that. And it also will take I'm not going to take credit for the gumball device. That's one of, I can't remember his name. Huh? One of your guys in the CTO shop. Actually gave us this analogy that we decided to use. We needed tokens from the WebSSO, SAML2, OAuth2, or whichever ones we decided to use. We needed a device or a token service that would give us like a gumball machine. Put something in, get something out. But it's got to be able to support, you know, the RESTful services or SOAP services, so that way it will be transparent, easier for our developers to leverage and integrate. So, as we handled forward, there's some additional things that we've learned. Federation services require a definitive partnership, not just beyond the legal aspects, but from an IT development and operations and maintenance. So when you talk about 15 government agencies integrating together in a federation, sounds really neat and great and cool. Well, you're talking 15 different bureaucratic processes, 15 different products, all trying to come figure out how to play together. Someone decides one evening that they want to make an upgrade, and it kind of disables all the users in the federation from that one agency. The phone calls go out, and a lot of people come to work from all 15 agencies, and it's not a fun experience. I think the last time we had a coworker who had spent somewhere around 24 hours in the office trying to figure out that it wasn't his fault. It was somebody else's. So with that, I'll go ahead and I'll say, here's some of the things that we've done to extend the usages as we've gone forward. It's actually started to provide us some significant flexibility for our apps. We've started to be able to externalize or take out from where our developers were using the authorization frameworks that they built on their own, using their Jazz providers or their .NET authentication authorization service providers that they built on their own. We've all heard this week that your authentication is only as strong as your proofing mechanisms and as you put it out. In this case, we want to get it away from them. We don't want them to do it. We want to make it simple. We kind of like to follow the acronym KISS, keep it simple, stupid. It's actually also able to act as a bridge for us. So while we deploy heavily PKI-dependent environments, we do have situations where, and I'll talk later, how we have Kerberos-intensive or Kerberized heavy environments. And this is also helping us to provide a bridge where I can have a Kerberized user hit PKI-enabled sites, or I can have a PKI-enabled user cross back over. We've also started leveraging it to provide federated attributes back to our desktops, our directories, because the goal is we spend a lot of money on web applications and collection software to put data on a web infrastructure that just gets pulled out and put on the desktop. Now what? We've got to figure out how to tie it all together. So I'll go into that also as a separate use case as I go on. And then the need for authorization services. We are also using this as a mechanism so that way not only can we use it for the people and non-person entities, but we're also using it for our services. When I talk about non-person entities, I'm talking about the machines, I'm talking about the networking devices. And we're trying to drive identity as far as we can so that we can understand it. All right, next. So what's the challenge? So our challenge is that it's that classical big data challenge. We've got more data coming in than we know what to do. It's coming in so fast and the variety is just widespread. The objective here is whoever can figure out how to piece it all together and exploit it is going to win. In this case, in some government customers, this could be from finding answering the Amber Alert. This could be finding the terrorist. This could be anything. So, I mean, this is what the goal is. If you think about this for a second, for a real world view or perspective, think about the World Cup, for example. That was either a marketer's dream or a marketer's nightmare. Here's a couple brief statistics I found online about the Marketing World Cup infographic I pulled some stuff from. 3.6 billion people were expected to watch this worldwide. That's over half the population of the world. An estimated $5.7 billion have been spent on sponsorship. Now think about this. This is the interesting facet. Did you know that there was only 15 minutes of commercials per game? And there's no TV timeouts like football. So that's all there was supposed to be. So you're looking at about $2 per person is what the total investment was made. Facebook estimated that 39% of its 1.28 billion users are fans of soccer. With that, 62% of those fans are on Facebook every day. So now you're talking about all this data that's being generated, and the marketers, people have got to figure out how to use it and do stuff with it. Twitter's estimated about 350,000 tweets per day. And then you got to think about the direct marketing and indirect. While Pitbull and J-Lo were out singing We Are the One as the official music video, you've got Shakira with her Activa release of La La La, with receiving over 97 million views in 2 weeks. All that's a lot of data and information to be able to process. But it's all great, but it all goes back to what they were talking about this morning. It's not just being able to get the right people, the right data at the right time, but it's also being able to have that experience that you're trying to build. And that's one of those things that we're trying to understand. So in some situations, we end up categorizing this data and building it out, and then we end up, once we make meaningful information of it, we're able to then derive more stringent controls or protections on top of it. So the overall challenge that we have is when you talk about this data in the government space, we spend a lot of time and effort trying to balance the need to know with the need to share. We can't go out and as much as government projects would like to go out and get billions and millions of dollars, budgetary realities are driving for efficiencies. We're not able to go out and buy a new ping federate every time we want, or a new Radiant Logic, or a new Axiomatics, or pick your favorite vendor. We've got to figure out how to work within the corporate enterprises, because a lot of times we find it's this not invented here syndrome that we're constantly dealing with. The customer, when they talk about handling their data, and when they start going to build out for these efficiencies, they've started thinking about some of their basic precepts and understandings. They've got a diverse set of users and interests corresponding to their needs. So now we have to figure out fine-grained versus coarse-grained authorization models. As much as they'd like to believe that they want a perfect model of no spillage of data, that's their requirement for robust data security services. The other thing that's necessary is trusted identity propagation and fidelity of services. This is where we start getting into our federated identity and service chaining via tokens. Transparency and flexibility to the business. The data owners are the ones that need to drive the ownership here, not the geeks on the floor or the data architects. We've got to figure out how to get it to the business owners. I mean, I heard some really nice presentations earlier that talked about it's not geeks on parade. It's the business it's got to be in languages and parlances that the business can understand, so that way they can effectively in turn audit it and know what's going on. The other facet is we're not going to pay for things twice. It's just not going to work. All right, this is everybody has seen this who's been here. It's a pretty simple, boring graphic, but what I'm trying to get at here is when we talk about data and protecting data, it's about the information policies, just like I was talking about. It's going to drive the metadata attributes that we need. And it doesn't matter where I put the decision points, where I put the enforcement points. That's a religious war I don't want to get into. It's about being able to, as the business derives and it says, in order to see something, you got to be in engineering. How that gets done, where it gets done, I don't care. It's just let's figure out a meaningful way of getting those attributes in there for the data and for the directories. So I'm trying to get through this real quick so we can go through. All right, so here's what I was talking about earlier. I was attending an interesting session in DC, and they talked about the top 10 red herrings that we deal with in access control. So these I think a lot of you will enjoy. So I'm not going to take credit for these. These were all done by a guy I ran into. His name was Ross. I can't find it real quick. His name was Ron Turner of NMed. So they're not meant to offend anybody or anything. There's nothing offensive, but it's just some straightforward humor about the red herrings in this industry. All right, there is my slides off. So there is no silver bullet in this, is what we're getting at. You're never going to get there. You're never going to arrive. This problem space requires an orchestration of commercial off-the-shelf product integration to solve it. The real trick that comes down to this is understanding how each piece integrates. You're not going to be able to go buy one thing and do it. It's just the fact. Add more security until you're finally secure. It doesn't work that way. Risk is there, but the zero risk is unlikely. You're just going to create a sphere of what I call obscurity, and thus giving a view of security through obscurity. And that just shows mismanagement and being confused and not really understanding what you're trying to do or to protect. Taking this approach will result in nothing more than causing more outages to your team and having to worry about some external entity within your organization. The third one, solve at the point of vulnerability. There is no point solution to this problem. You're not going to be able to go buy some magic firewall or some magic device. It's not going to fix it. So no one solution. It's just like the bouncer. He can only focus on one problem at a time. Remember, the bouncer is almost like a federation server to the bar. He checks your creds, your ID, when you walk in. He sees if you're over 21, he puts a stamp on you. From there, the bartender decides that if you have the stamp on you, that the one that the bouncer is supposed to have, he'll let you in and give you a drink. Don't have it, he's going to give you the boot. All right, let IT manage security. Doesn't work that way. The IT-based security game is over. You're going to have to figure out, the business is the one that understands the risk and what's required. It's almost like Icarus, who failed to listen to what his father said when he decided to fly with the wings. He was told, don't go too close to the sun. And what did he do? He got a little too close. And it's just like if you think about, some people will argue that you really haven't succeeded in life until you've been hacked. I'm not sure I would agree with that. I mean, this is, he learned his lesson, although he did die. It sounds more like a resume building exercise. A friendly GUI is a nice to have. It's wrong. It's all about the interface. If you don't understand what you're trying to put together, and you can't clearly articulate it or build it out for the users to see, then you're not going to be able to gain the trust in the business or in the user base. Policy is software, not my bag. The policy officer is the man, and he is the one that's in control. He's the one that's going to be able to tell you whether or not what you've done is effective or correct, or effective and correct, because he's the one that's going to help perform those auditing analysis that are there. If they can't understand what you have done, then you're not doing your job effectively. Policy is equal to software. It is equal to software, and it's got to be done in an effective manner that can be understood. It's just like the Latin phrase, Doris Confutio Linguarum, which is short for I don't know, go ask the legal department. So policy language it's language. And moreover, it needs to be something that people can understand. So this is basically when you develop policy, it's got to be something simple. So when you go out and you say it's authorization services, basically if you go across the top, they outline, it is prohibited that a contractor or volunteer or technical research or vocational nurse who is in behavioral health can modify these types of records. I'm not going to be able to take an Xactable policy and slap that in front of some business person. Sorry, Jerry, sorry, David, or even an alpha. Okay, it just doesn't work that way. And I'll give you a really good example that I think that really will drive things home. How many know what the word constipado means? Okay, so if you know any Spanish, you'll know that constipado actually means I'm congested and I've got something, I'm sick. Doesn't mean I'm constipated. So if you were to go to the pharmacist and say I'm constipado, you're going to get one of two meds. Which do you want, the X-Lax or the cold medicine? All right, so access control. It's subject, resource, and the action. There's more to it than that. You've got to also take into consideration, it's all about time and space. Those help in making the overall decisions. In the beginning, yeah, you can go off and you can handle it about those three entities. But in the end, don't box yourself in, because you're going to have to, at some time, be able to account and understand that somebody's accessing that system or outside the wrong boundaries of time. And also, you have to remember, mobile people are global people. ABAC or Xactable products, they're the answer. Well, they're only as good as the attributes that you get to provide for them. If that trust chain isn't good, then you're not making any decisions that are effective or ideal. You have to really start thinking about the provenance of these attributes. How long ago have they been provisioned? What's the minimum time that I need for these attributes to determine staleness? Minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, years. Some things aren't going to change. Your office will probably change periodically. Your last name probably won't change all that much at all unless you get married or divorced or you hyphenate it. But some of these things you're going to have to really think about and understand when you're working within the customer. The last but not least is audit. So you have to remember audit. It's key because in the end, it rules. And it's going to help protect you in the end and help understand when the auditors come in and want to know exactly who's doing what and why. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and get started onto the use cases. So the overall. So I've got about 3 different use cases. I should have boxed these off, but I didn't. I use the term internal, external, synonymous with on-prem and off-prem. So if I will try not to trip my own self up here. So remember what our goal was, is the goal with the customer was to be able to take internal and external, a off-prem app that they would focus out to a government community, and to be able to allow to stand it up quickly, and then to be able to lift it up, and then to put it back into an internal environment, leveraging 2 complete separate authentication mechanisms. One strictly with PKI, the other with integrated Windows authentication. The next thing that we talk about will be the provisioning process, because the goal is in the end, I want to be able to take a separate administration point that will sit out here and to be able to control my authorization policies to my apps here and outside, and to control access to the file services that users are going to access. I want that to be transparent. and I want it to sit out here. On top of that, which we haven't done yet, which we're in the process, I want to be able to wrap up my digital rights management policies into this. So that way, when my files leave my enterprise or my enterprise, I can control who can open them and why and how. All right, so external authentication. I think we kind of all have been listening to this and hearing about it all day. The other thing that our application developers took a little bit to get them to understand and grasp it. They felt that the JAS providers that we had internally were sufficient enough for them, but once we worked with them to explain to them the value of how the external token service would work, and then the power that they could gain later by leveraging this for their data exchanges. Because what was happening when they would do their data exchanges, it was an off-by-one solution every time that they were plugging in with other apps. All right, and so then the replatforming became just an exercise in futility. All it was for them essentially was reset the properties file on their application to point to the new provider. It was that simple for them, and then they were done. The other thing that we're running into right now, we have a customer that's constantly telling us that they want to be able to hit external apps. But the problem is this environment down here is strictly, significantly Kerberos heavy. And because of the X509 or PKI requirements that are there, we're having a hard time to get the PKI requirements met inside. So what we're ending up doing is we're leveraging the token service by having any app they want us to plug into, to have it plug into the token service. So that way what we have the ability to do is have a user that's in the internal environment reach out and hit anything that's sitting up in our off-prem area, because anything in the off-prem will either be plugged into our external STS or will be plugged into one of our partners, which the downstream provider, they'll be a downstream partner for our token service. Then there's the data exchange, which I've been talking about. I'm going to spin through this real quick. And then and then the next thing is the provisioning. So I wish I would have read more about SCIM, because we ended up writing all the code via a REST interface that a coworker of mine wrote for us. But basically, we take all those attributes that we need from these attribute providers. We take like certain Office ID data or clearance data, and we publish it and we put it in our AD. We put it down there because of some of the changes that have happened in the in Kerberos with Kerberos armoring or armored Kerberos. I keep flipping it. I can use claims now at the desktop level. So now, because I have all these enriched attributes that I'm passing around in the web tier, I want to take those and use them at the desktop tier now also. Because by doing that, I can now apply the same policies and controls there that I do in the web tier. So by doing that, I'm now able to restrict access to the files. We still have a tagging issue. We work with we have a classification management tool that we're able to populate on the fly. We had to write our own context handler, so I can take text files, graphics, anything that sits at the desktop. I can tag it. Then as soon as anything changes about you in your Kerberos and your ticketing for your clearances or your office or whatever, those files just disappear, no longer accessible by you. So those are some of the things that we're working towards, or this is actually done. This is actually going under testing right now. And I think because I'm trying to wrap this up, that's it. And I can't tell you how hard this is to find a clean version of this. So, so if you Google whale tail, be careful.
That's perfect. We got 5 minutes for questions, I think.
Oh,
yeah. So we got 5 minutes left in the session for questions. Anyone have some questions? I'll walk the mic down to you. All right, well, I guess it's beach party time then. Thanks, everybody.